we were really drawn as a group to bring mass timber everywhere, if at all possible, and to kind of remove all these roadblocks that we're finding. So whether that's how do I build a mass timber building in a state that's never done it before, there's no engineer that we can find that wants to do mass timber because it's so new. Okay, well then we can provide, the delegated design on that. Or we can find some wood and we can find a supplier to send it, but to do all that hardware install and CNC fabrication, there's a year lead time to do that. How do we tighten that window up? So we saw all these kind of roadblocks in the marketplace, and really TimberLab is trying to fill as many of them as possible to make sure that mass timber can be utilized across the country.
This is the Mass Timber Group Show. I'm Nick.
And I'm Brady, and we talk to sustainable building experts. Today we caught up with Taylor Cabot, the mass timber pre-construction manager for TimberLab, an industry powerhouse in mass timber fabrication, installation, and pre-construction services. Taylor's worked on some of the most impressive projects in North America, including the Carbon 12 building in Portland, which garnered her a 2018 Women of Vision Award.
We talked about when to bring in mass timber specialists into a project. We also went over the 3 most important things you need to consider when working with mass timber.
But before we jump in, we're helping AEC professionals learn to build with mass timber so that they can change the world with their projects at the next Mass Timber Group Summit taking place in Denver. Save your seat by clicking the link in the show notes below. So with that, let's get into it.
Yeah, so I went to school for architecture. I graduated at the absolutely wonderful time to graduate in architecture of 2008. So I graduated kind of into the Great Recession, and just kind of had a moment to think about, okay, well, what do I want to do if architecture isn't readily available? And I've always been really drawn. I think my favorite part of architecture was really actually being a part of the buildings and the making of things. And so I jumped over into the construction field and started working over there as kind of a facilities manager. And then I kind of moved into actual job sites, GC, general contracting. And then I was really lucky back in 2014. I wanted to work locally, and I joined a design build development firm called Kaiser Path. And Ben Kaiser has, been in the industry for a long time and is hook, line, and sinker in love with mass timber, and had kind of stated early on that he was only ever going to build in mass timber. And so kind of by joining that firm, even though the mass timber wasn't initially what drew me to Kaiser Path, it really cemented kind of me getting involved in it. And then, I think, and everybody will tell you this, if they've done a mass timber job once, you just kind of want to do it again and again. And so I have been doing that for the last 15 years.
Great. So working with Kaiser and Path, coming out as an architect, how did you make that jump from architect to kind of managing the pre-con side of things?
Yeah, so initially I was in straight on construction. So I was a project manager in the trailer every day. So I really kind of cut my teeth on the hands-on pieces, seeing how everything came together on site, understanding how it was built, how it was logistically brought in, understanding kind of how we interface directly with the suppliers, and how that happened. But also being a part of a design build firm and having that architecture background meant that when I went into the office with the architecture team, I could understand the model and the shop drawings and kind of understand how the design was being put together. So that was really helpful that I could kind of speak to both sides of the office. That was kind of one of the goals of Kaiser Path, was that everybody could kind of both work in the office setting of architecture and engineering, but also, really understand construction and feel like they could own it out in the field as well.
Hey, we're going to get back to the podcast in just a second. But first, I have a question for you. Are you somebody looking to build a mass timber project? If the answer is yes, then you need to put together an experienced team.
Our partners at Cornerstone Timber Frames are leaders in heavy timber construction and have 30 plus years of experience, which means you can trust them to get the job done right.
They collaborate with Nordic Structures to bring you the highest quality FSC certified mass timber available. They also have some of the most advanced fabrication technology in the industry, so your project goes up smoothly without costly on-site modification or delays.
That means they have the experience, network, and technology to make your next mass timber project a success. Learn more about Cornerstone Timber Frames by clicking the link in the show notes below.
And when you first started getting into the pre-con side of things, was there a specific project that you kind of like cut your teeth on?
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty new to the pre-construction side. I've been working in operations, project management, actually putting these buildings together, with TimberLab for the last 4 years. I recently moved into the pre-construction role in the last 6 months, which has been pretty exciting for me to be able to kind of come back, I think a little bit more to my roots. I'm interfacing with architects and engineers every day, which it's been great. But still kind of having an understanding of the back end of how these pieces are going together on site and are going to be constructed. And I've really enjoyed kind of that transition over.
What are broad examples, maybe for somebody who doesn't really know, like what the difference of Swinnerton is maybe compared to TimberLab, and maybe even the relationship between the two, and then, kind of where you come in and where you play a role now in the mass timber world?
Yeah, so super interesting. Swinnerton started building, Swinnerton's been around for over 100 years. So they have a really long history of general contracting, specifically on the West Coast, but they're now all over the United States. Back in 2016, they started to build the first tech credit union out in Hillsboro in Oregon, which at the time was the biggest mass timber building ever built in the United States. That was their very first building, and they instantly knew that it was going to be something different. And they could see that this was going to have a pretty big place in the marketplace coming down the line. That excitement kind of led them to make Swinnerton Mass Timber. So they just kind of had a small, kind of subset that was focusing purely on mass timber. And then as we started kind of building more and more buildings, we wanted to offer more and more services. So we wanted to bring in engineering. We wanted to bring in CNC fabrication. We wanted to do add services to the mass timber, which is, coatings and hardware and all sorts of other things that we started seeing were kind of bottlenecks to the supply of mass timber. And so as we added more and more of these things to our portfolio, it just started to kind of make sense for us to have our own company. And so we broke off in 2021 to become TimberLab. We still live under Swinnerton's Incorporated's umbrella, so we're a separate entity, but ultimately we do have some ties back. But it also allows us to go out and work with other general contractors and to work in markets that Swinnerton doesn't have offices as well. We were really drawn as a group to bring mass timber everywhere, if at all possible, and to kind of remove all these roadblocks that we're finding. So whether that's how do I build a mass timber building in a state that's never done it before, or there's no engineer that we can find that wants to do mass timber because it's so new. Okay, well then we can provide, the delegated design on that. Or we can find some wood and we can find a supplier to send it, but to do all that hardware install and CNC fabrication, there's a year lead time to do that. How do we tighten that window up? So we saw all these kind of roadblocks in the marketplace, and really TimberLab is trying to fill as many of them as possible to make sure that mass timber can be utilized across the country.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of existing mass timber production capability, specifically in the glulam world. I think there's almost 100 different glulam manufacturers across North America. But I hear a lot about TimberLab being one of the few that are that took up that fabrication, that missing piece to kind of take that existing stock and then plug it into these mass timber buildings. Where do you guys sit in that fabrication space? I know you guys just opened up a second facility over on the East Coast. Is that a majority of what you guys are doing, or is that just one of the many services you guys offer?
It was really the first bottleneck that we saw. I mean, you nailed it, where, there's about 100 to 150 glulam suppliers throughout the United States. There's really good coverage. The problem was the number of CNC machines across the United States that could use that could actually handle the size of a glue laminated timber, specifically the really big ones as well. We were talking 2, maybe 3. So all of a sudden, you have a product that everybody wants that's available, but you don't have a way to bring it forward and get it to the job site in the way that we view mass timber, which is kind of this kit of parts. So that really, we saw that hole and we were really excited to fill it. We opened our facility in Portland, Oregon in 2021, and we have 2 CNC machines out of there. One of them is a large format, so it allows us to do some really large glue lams, which is a huge help. And then we just opened up our Southeast facility last year, and we have 2 CNC machines there, and we have room to add even more. So we're really trying to, once again, create that network across the United States. When we're on the East Coast, we're able to utilize a lot of our kind of southern suppliers out of the Southeast. Also a really great landing pad for European supply. It's pretty easy to bring over some of those billets by boat. And then, of course, here in Portland, Oregon, we're kind of in the timber basket, if you will. So there's plenty of suppliers around, but we're really being able to add that CNC fabrication and pre-install of hardware and be able to kind of expand the market that way without having to be, a full-blown, full-service supplier.
And when somebody is contemplating mass timber for a build, when do they need to reach out to a company like TimberLab? If you're sitting at your desk and you've got a project that comes across and the client says, hey, we want mass timber for these reasons, does somebody come to you later in that design bid phase, or when should they reach out and talk to somebody like you?
Yeah, I mean, if we had our pick, we want to know about your building when it's a napkin sketch. We want to hear about what your goals and your dreams are for the building. We want to have, we want to have this wood type. We want it to be the most carbon, neutral as possible. Or maybe it's that, we know we want to do a long span beam over across, a huge auditorium. I think we want to know as early as possible kind of what everybody's dream is, and to try to keep that alive, to try to make sure that the project is going to pencil. It's going to make sense economically. It's going to make sense logistically. How do we get those pieces to you in the time frame and the schedule that you need? If for some reason there's something that's throwing up a roadblock, we want to figure out if we can remove it or change the design, or create some flexibility to allow that dream to still happen, but just be changed a little bit. So the kind of the sooner we get involved, we think the more likely that projects are going to hit that goal and are actually going to happen. We certainly get brought in on jobs all the time that are fully designed, and we're just kind of bidding a package. And that's fine. We don't mind that at all, but really to bring, we feel like, the best value, and to make sure that everybody's getting the best bang for their buck, and also, kind of preserving as many of their goals as possible. It's to bring us in early and to make sure that everybody kind of buys into that process together.
So it sounds like also you go and you have the relationships with these mass timber producers and, suppliers. And so you kind of go you take the blueprint to the people that you've already worked with. Will you work with anybody under the sun that it makes sense to get to that geographical location? Or do you have a set of trusted mass timber producers that you're working with and that's really working well? Or is it literally anybody that you could open up that relationship with?
Yeah, so we have master purchase agreements with most of the CLT suppliers across the United States, and also some in Europe as well. So, our goal is to have the biggest pool possible. In that process, of course, we've created some really great relationships with a lot of our partners, and we've helped each other when we had an issue. They've stepped up to us. And on the opposite side, they have an issue or something, they can reach out to us as well. So our goal is to bring as many suppliers into the market and to support them as much as possible, and to allow us to kind of bring the most competitive pricing and also kind of the highest quality package. So we see that a lot, where sometimes we will utilize their fabrication facilities because it makes the most sense for the job. Or sometimes we've gotten calls on jobs where they were supposed to fabricate it and they've run out of space or they've run out of production slots. And all of a sudden they say, okay, can you go and fabricate these pieces for us, just because we're kind of in this tight spot. And the community, the mass timber community right now is super small, but really rich. And it still has a lot of, a lot of us know each other by first names and have been over to each other's houses. So I love it. I think it's really beautiful that we can kind of come together. I had a project a couple years ago back in COVID, and we had an issue getting some of the CLT panels down to the site. We had already built 3 levels of a 4-story building. We desperately wanted to get the roof on the structure before winter. We were out in Bend, Oregon. And when a press broke on our supplier, another supplier stepped in and replicated the panels exactly to the specifications of the other supplier, so that we could get a roof on the building and close it in. So I don't see that happening, a lot of times in other parts of construction where they've been around for a long time and there's competition. I think everybody's trying to make mass timber exist and succeed across the country. And it's been really successful seeing kind of everybody being willing to step up and make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that makes this industry unique is the people and the collaboration across those different companies, even if some of them are quote unquote competitors. What are some of the other differences that you're seeing maybe from the pre-con side of things when people are contemplating working with mass timber versus like a concrete and steel structure? What are the main differences that particularly AEC teams need to consider to make mass timber a viable option?
Yeah, I think that the word, that I always like to give is flexibility. As much flexibility as we can be given, and keeping the building as flexible as possible is great. We totally understand that a building, there's the owner's input and there's the architectural design, and then of course the engineering input, and everybody's driving forward. But when we get brought in early in pre-construction, we're able to make these little tweaks that are going to say like, hey, if the building is 60 feet long and there's only these 2 or 3 suppliers who have a 60-foot long press. So that's going to really narrow your pool very early in the project. But, if you could get it down to 52 feet or 51 feet, all of a sudden we've opened up 2 or 3 additional suppliers to the game, and we're going to be able to go out to bid and make sure that the schedule can be met because there's different people who can do it during different times. So, the earlier that we're involved in having a seat at that table and being able to be like, is that even a thing that we can do, that we could reduce the width of the building, or maybe that isn't something, but then there's something else where, everybody really wanted the building to be Douglas fir. Okay. But then, as we keep driving down, through this, it really makes sense that European supply is going to be a great option on this job. And it's going to bring down costs. And, is the lighter, brighter European spruce problematic? And kind of understanding that. So, we always like to encourage people to be flexible to changes or to some, little tweaks that we can make that is going to make the project a little bit more successful. And I think part of that is coming in early. And making sure that the design isn't so far down the line that these changes feel devastating or just aren't feasible at that point in the project.
Yeah, those are sentiments that we hear echoed time and time again when people are talking about working with mass timber buildings. It's got to get involved early because there are these unique challenges and opportunities that mass timber affords. If somebody is in the design build phase or the pre-con phase of a mass timber project, have you seen any best practices when they're laying out a building or whether they're selecting team members? Are there things that can really set you up for success in that pre-con stage that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I gotta think on that for a second. I think years ago there was a lot of trepidation. Not a lot of people had a lot of experience with mass timber, and they were kind of looking around. And initially it was like, okay, well, let's go to a supplier and make a commitment to a supplier as early as possible. And, they know their product and they know what they're building. And that was totally true. And they could kind of hold everybody's hand kind of through that process. The goal, I think, now is as we get more and more architects and engineers who have, a wealth of building knowledge, or maybe even just like one or two projects under their belt, is kind of allowing that move to a supplier to happen later on in the process and allowing the design to kind of get iterated and tightened and honed before you kind of bring that supplier pool in. And I think that's really kind of opened up the playing field a little bit more and allowed people to pull from a bunch of different suppliers that they may not have had either a past relationship with or hadn't even thought about because they were in a different part of the country. And so I think that's been pretty useful to kind of understand that concept. Our biggest thing is to kind of understand what is the goal of the project and what are we moving forward. Obviously, the goal is probably all of these things, but kind of trying to understand, is it, we'll use the term, a meaningful use of mass timber. What is the meaningful use of it? Is it to be able to see it everywhere? You want to bring, wood up to viewers and visitors or the owner and allow them to experience it? Is it that you want to tell the very best carbon story that you possibly can, and LCAs matter, and maybe you're going after a certification on the project. And so you're looking for wood with certifications attached to it, or you want transparency of where that wood is coming from. You want to understand the logistics of how it got to you and what that footprint is. That's a whole nother goal that is achievable. And then kind of the last goal, of course, that we have is some people are, all about pushing the envelope from an engineering standpoint. They want to see those big, beautiful beams doing things that people can't believe. And that's kind of, a whole different side of it and understanding how to supply that. And so when we look at these kind of three goals that most people have, the goal is, which is goal one, what's goal two, what's goal three. Sometimes people don't even have all three. They have one and that's all they want. And our goal is to go get that. And use kind of understanding that and baking down to that is really helpful. It helps us pick a supplier pool. It helps us understand, from a detailing or an engineering standpoint, kind of what is the most important aspect for us to be putting the right time and energy into as well.
Well, you've worked on some of the largest projects in the world at this point, with the Portland International Airport, with the Ascent in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the world's tallest mass timber residential apartment complex, to the Heartwood, to the Thesis, to the Neary 10-story shake table that is going down and just kind of wrapping up in San Diego. I know there's many more tests to happen, and there's an incredible amount of other projects under your belt. Are there any projects that you have started working on recently that you can talk about, that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm always excited when we can bring a project that's going to be kind of used by the public. I think that's really exciting to me, to be able to, believe that anybody could walk into our projects and see them. I've built some really beautiful office structures or condo buildings with carbon 12, and nobody can see them now. You can drive by, you can look at them. You might have to take my word for it that there's wood inside of it, because oftentimes they're clad in metal panel or brick, and the wood isn't on the exterior. So anytime I can kind of build a project where somebody can experience it and come in off the street and be able to kind of see the wood and see all that work that went into it is really powerful. Years ago, I did the OSU Cascades Ray Hall project. And I love that because anytime I'm in Bend, I can pop in or take family members to go see it. Recently, I became involved in CU Boulder is building a residence hall on their campus, and that's going to be fully mass timber. We're super excited about that. We're going to bring 300 beds to the university, and it's all going to be done out of mass timber. And it's being able to provide that to a university where there's students and young people These dorms are going to be for the international students, which I think is really neat as well. These projects really kind of excite me and are really great to be able to kind of show off and come back and visit many years later.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of student residence buildings that are going up and utilizing mass timber. And I think that has to do with like the column and grid spacing and optimizing floor heights and the speed and obviously the sustainability factors. But I have noticed seeing on LinkedIn and other mass timber news sources that those are a building use that's going up a lot around the world. If you could choose the next project that you were working on, what would really excite you?
I've always wanted to do a library. TimberLab has done several libraries, and somehow it never ends up being me involved in it. I'm a huge reader. I love the library system. I always want to be a part of it in any way, and I really feel like there's this beautiful story about mass timber being in kind of a building filled with other trees and things like that. And like I said, it's really a community-minded building. One thing I'm just starting to see it come into elementary schools. I have a young child, and I really feel like a lot of elementary schools in this country could benefit from having really warm and beautiful environments. I'd love to be able to see some sort of an initiative or a push for the public school buildings in this country to change over, or at least a portion of them to go mass timber as well.
Speaking of public schools, I got to tour the Denver public school that Swinnerton and TimberLab did. It was absolutely gorgeous. A huge tilt-up concrete walls with a massive CLT roof and glue lam, and it was just stunning the way everything came together. So it's always fun to see schools pop up with the biophilia and all the science about how amazing that is to teach and learn from. Coming up into your industry, who did you look up to? Who inspired you? And whether that be a company or a person, who do you think more people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so interested from my architectural background. I think, one of the reasons why I moved to the Pacific Northwest from the East Coast was I felt this natural pull to the buildings that were already being kind of made out here. I think there's a really great use of natural materials and a lot of wood and ice. That was kind of a pull. I come out here and I think about, Methuen, I think about, ZGF, I think about, some of these, Olsen Kundig does a lot of concrete, but they make these really beautiful, kind of buildings that work with the environment and kind of nestle in. And that really inspired me as an architect to want to be out in this part of the country. And then being able to actually, do some buildings with them over the years has been really inspiring. And kind of ensures that they're going to continue to move forward, and that hopefully there'll be more and more of them. I also feel like I have to make a plug because Susan Jones is getting the AIA Gold Award in January, and she is such a powerhouse to our industry, and she's super fabulous. And so great congratulations to her. Nobody couldn't deserve it more. And she's a wonderful human for mass timber. But also has been such a strong advocate for women in the field as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have all these beautiful people in the mass timber world. I think, I mean, you said it, it's the people that make the industry go around, right? I mean, we've all got lovely machines, we've all got wonderful capabilities, but in the end, it's the people that make everything great. Before we ask our last question, where can people find you, and how can people connect with TimberLab?
Yeah, you should go to our website, timberlab.com. We have all of our projects there, and you can really read more and dive in. We have a little kind of blog posts that we do kind of quarterly, which kind of talk about different topics. We, of course, are findable on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can reach me and my pre-con team at precon@timberlab.com. So you can always get one of us there. We have, a huge bunch of resources. Isn't necessarily always going to be me, but we have some people that have great engineering backgrounds, some people who have architecture backgrounds. We have people who, have been building, log homes and framing large mass timber buildings their whole lives. So they really understand wood. We're starting to have, forestry people involved as well, and some, heavy hitting CNC operators, and, kind of visual design and construction people. So if you have a question, it may not be me answering it, but we have this kind of amazing corral of experts that we can connect you with inside our organization.
Yeah, you guys have an absolutely wonderful website. I think I've spent way too much time on there reading and looking at all the projects that you have, all the resources you have available, and then highly recommend everybody follow you guys on LinkedIn. I mean, the amount of projects and stuff that you guys are putting out is unreal. And so our last question is kind of a fun one. If you could change anything in the industry, anything at all, what would you change and why?
Well, I like that you said it's fun, and I'm going to give a really unfun answer. So I want to standardize CLT panel sizes. I think it's the number one holdup for a lot of projects is like, okay, what's the width and what's the length and how are we going to get it? And everybody has these different product offerings, different lamella thicknesses, different strengths and grades. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get anyone to change it because it's just me. And there's a lot of moving parts to why, all of the suppliers have what they have. But I would love to get to the point where we have kind of a few key sizes that everybody can kind of, know and bank on. I'm thinking of going to a lumber yard and there's 2x4s and 2x6s and things like that. I think, as we bring more and more suppliers on, I just see that having that kind of availability of and certainty to a product is going to make it a lot easier to get projects pushed through quicker, get them designed quicker, get them built quicker, and also potentially be able to kind of build, manufacture, and fabricate kind of billets that are available. So people can also build, little structures quite quickly. Right now, it feels like small buildings have the same lead time almost as the bigger ones. And it's purely down to kind of just all these micro customizations. So fingers crossed. I know it's a huge investment to make changes to your presses. But if there's like a CLT god out there, I want her to give everyone the same press so that we can make the same materials. So.
Well, luckily the industry is moving at a blazing speed right now and evolving and changing. So hopefully the more and more volume out there, the more and more options out there will be. But I think there's good things on the horizon either way. Just going to be a lot more, stock and billets and everything to choose from. But thank you so much for being with us. I can't wait till you come out and speak as the keynote speaker at the Mass Timber Group Summit in Denver. That's a 3-day event happening July 31st, 1st and 2nd. So people can meet you and the TimberLab team in person, do a little back of the napkin drawing, and maybe bring one of somebody's dream into a reality. So we'll see you soon for that. Thank you so much for being a part of the episode.
Yeah. I can't wait to see you guys in August. That sounds great.